In this video, I'll discuss working with layers in Adobe Flash Professional CC 2015. Now, the timeline allows you to create layers, and it's a bit of a tricky metaphor for people who have used layers in other applications like Illustrator or Photoshop, because the layers have a twofold purpose in Flash Professional. The first purpose, you can see here, we have a single layer called Layer 1, and then what appears to be an animation with some keyframes. The keyframes are indicated by the various dots right here. And if I go ahead and press play, you can see what happens to the animation as it scrubs through the various frames. Now, the purpose of layers is to separate things, and that's kind of important because when you create layers, say in Photoshop, you have one thing on top of another, and the idea is similar in Flash Professional. The first thing we want to do, though, is change the name of this layer. I'll go ahead and double-click it. The name Layer 1 is the default name given by the application, but I want to call this Bouncing Ball and press Enter. So notice that you can change the name of your layers just by double-clicking them. And you can also move the layer panel out or in. So just be aware of that. Sometimes if you've got very long names for layers, you may want to actually move that out. And the reason that we want to rename layers, and this is quite important, I'll show you an example of why this is important, is because when you're working with Flash, it's quite common that you'll have many, many layers. This is an application that I created several years ago, and each layer has its own purpose. On the very top, I have actions. Now, this contains all my action script. Let's go ahead and take a look. And this is the language that's used to create applications in Flash. So that layer contains my actions. This layer contains text frames. You can see here and here. As I clicked on the layer, the items became selected. We have a layer called counter, which has frames for counters down here. We have one called buttons for these buttons, one called shapes for various shapes that just sort of act as props, and one for background. So I've created many, many layers, and so it's important to name them as you create them. Sort of plan out what you're going to use that layer for, because as you get into creating applications or movies in Flash, you're going to get a lot of layers. And if they're all called layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, you're going to have a very difficult time maintaining and working with your application. Now, you can create new layers. I'll go ahead and click down here to create a new layer. And there you go, layer 2. And I'm going to call this box. Now, on the box layer, which I'm going to create